Just hit a button, Morty. Give me a beat.
Oh man, okay, all right,
Welcome to another installment of Miss Simon's Biology. So we're continuing our discussion of plants, so let's go ahead and get started. So today we're talking about plant reproduction, so how plants reproduce. So I'm going to start studying, I'm going to start my lessons off by at least giving you guys a study tip, because I feel like one thing that I've been doing is just telling you guys to study, and I haven't been giving you actual ideas. So I'm actually going to start giving you ideas of little things that you can do to make big changes in like your habits. Okay, so let's say you're waiting in line or riding in the car or just kind of like sitting on your phone. If you spend 3 minutes doing the flashcards on the Quizlet, either Quizlet.com or there's a Quizlet app, then already you're seeing the information more often, and you're seeing it in like a repetitive way. Okay, and that's like the best way to study. So even if you spend 3 minutes a day, so 3 minutes out of your 24 hours of the day, that's still better than 0 minutes a day. Okay, so I recommend doing that. Especially, let's say like you have my class on an A day, while on B days, if you spend 3 minutes doing the flashcards of the A day, you're actually gonna like be able to remember that information a little better. Okay, so that's an idea. Okay, one other thing, or not one other thing. So in the last lesson, I asked you guys like what types of things you'd like to see. Now this isn't the data from everyone, but this is just the data from like what I got before I recorded this video. So far people were saying that they want step-by-step solving of exit tickets and star questions. People were saying they want extra videos, so like Amoeba Sisters or Khan Academy. To look at more practice problems that are not necessarily for a grade, I can do that. And of course the flashcards, I've already made those on a Quizlet. People said they want to do review games like Kahoot or quizzes, and some people would like a Spanish science dictionary. So those are some things that I can definitely work with. Now, one of the main things that people were asking for is breakout rooms. So in Google Meets, like you join the meet and then I put you guys into a breakout room with maybe 3 or 4 people. And then in that group of 3 or 4 people, you guys can work on the assignments together. So I'm actually going to begin coordinating that so that we can, do that. And that'll be really helpful because you guys can actually work together on work, even though you guys are not in the same place. Okay, so let's go ahead and start our discussion of plant reproduction. Those new resources will be put up, and I will definitely let you know when everything is put together. But just know that I am working on getting more and more things onto that resources documents for you guys. Okay, so in our before we get into plant reproduction, actually, we're gonna get into a recap of what we already learned. So this right here is a plant, obviously. Okay, so we have leaves, there's stems, and of course the roots. So roots, what was the function of roots? Right, roots were made to soak up minerals and water from the soil. Exactly. What is the function of stems? Stems allow the transport of materials and they support the plant's body parts. Right, so we know that water is absorbed through the roots, but water must be used by the entire plant, so it has to have a way of transporting. So stems are where the vessels of the plant, the vascular tissues are, and that's going to be xylem and of course phloem. How about leaves? What was their function? Exactly. Leaves are designed to do photosynthesis, right? They protect, and they're designed to do photosynthesis. So as light energy is captured by them, they are creating carbohydrates, they're creating sugars, they're creating glucose. Those are all the same exact thing. Okay? They also give off oxygen through the process of photosynthesis. Leaves also protect against water loss by closing their stomata, right? They're going to close their stomata. And of course, leaves exchange gases. So leaves take in carbon dioxide and give off oxygen, as we know. Review question. Which part of the plant's vascular tissue carries sugar and nutrients throughout the plant? So the key word here is going to be vascular tissue, right? So we're talking about the vessels, right? So you and I, we have blood vessels like arteries and veins. Plants don't have blood. They have other vascular tissues. Okay, and which of those vascular tissues carries the sugars? Sugars are the products of photosynthesis. That's going to be the phloem, okay? And if you did not know that, you need to be looking at my Quizlet, okay? My Quizlet, as you can see, this is a screenshot from it. It's very basic. I give you the bare minimum of what you need to know, okay? So xylem carries water. Phloem carries products of photosynthesis, also known as glucose sugars, and I also have included pictures. Okay, so today's lesson objectives are going to be students will diagram and label the structures of plants that are responsible for both sexual and asexual reproduction. Students will sequence the events that occur in structures that are involved in the reproduction of plants. So we're going to talk about diagramming reproductive structures in plants and also what events are occurring. Okay, so everyone kind of should already know this. Reproduction is to make an offspring, to make another organism, right? So we have what's called asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. So asexual reproduction is always going to make an exact copy, a clone, while sexual reproduction is going to create genetically different offspring. Okay. So the reproductive structures of plants are going to be flowers, seeds, and fruits. So we're going to talk about what those do. So this right here is a video. I'm not going to play it for time's sake, but make sure that when you're reviewing this, that you actually watch this video. It's about 3 minutes long and it's really good. So seeds. The purpose of seeds, if you did not know this already, is actually going to be nourishment for the developing plant. Okay, so this is the whole seed, and inside of it is the plant embryo. So if you did not know what embryo is, an embryo is a developing organism. So human embryos are called fetuses, right? But just the general term for it is embryo. Okay, and there's food inside of it, and of course there's a seed coat that protects the embryo. The purpose of fruits. Fruits are designed to, again, protect the seed, okay? And they are also designed for seed dispersal. So here's the seed. Inside of the seed, there's a developing embryo and food for the developing embryo, okay? And there's this fruit that is around it that protects it, okay? It also attracts animals like birds or humans. And when birds and humans or other organisms actually eat that fruit, the fruit is really yummy. So they're going to actually one, they're going to like to get that fruit, and two, they're going to actually take that fruit and move it around. They're going to disperse the seeds. And, plants want to grow as much as possible. So if they're attracting animals and animals are moving their seeds everywhere, the plants are able to grow and be planted in more places. Okay? The purpose of petals. So petals look pretty, right? These are flower petals. They look pretty. They attract insects like bees, or they could even attract animals, and those insects or animals are going to touch the flower. If they touch the flower, they're going to get a little bit of pollen on them. And as they move around, they're transporting that pollen to different flowers, right? And we're going to learn about what pollen is and why it's good to transport pollen from flower to flower. And the purpose of flowers. Flowers are the reproductive structures of plants. They produce both pollen, which is essentially plant version of sperm. Pollen contains plant sperm, and eggs. So it produces both, okay? It produces both. Flowers produce both parts. I'm going to talk about that more in depth, okay? So this is a picture of a flower, okay? So we have some things that are labeled. We have the stamen that is labeled. We have the petal that is labeled. And then we have what's called the pistil, which is also known as the carpel, that is labeled. And we're going to go through those parts. So we've already talked about the petal. The petal's job is to attract insects and animals and allow them to move pollen from flower to flower. Okay, so first things first, we're going to talk about the stamen. Okay, I'm telling you this. The stamen, this part right here, all three of these are called stamens. They are the male part of the flower. What is the function? What is the reproductive function of something that is male? Exactly, to produce sperm. Sperm in plants is pollen. How about this right here? This right here is the female part, the pistil, which is also known as the carpel. Those two words mean the exact same thing. There's just two different names for it. Okay, that is the female part of the plant. So this right here, this whole thing is called the pistil. It's also called the carpel. What is the function of the female part of reproductive systems? It's to produce the eggs. Okay, produce the eggs. Eggs are also known as ova, ovum. Those are the same thing. Okay, so now here's another flower, another diagram, but look, it's the exact same things that we've just seen. This right here is the stamen, right? And this right here is the pistil or the carpel. Okay, it just looks a little bit different because it's a different type of flower, but it's the exact same structures. Okay, so the stamen can be broken down into two pieces. The anther, which is this top part, and then the filament, which is this long, skinny part. Okay, and again, we know the stamen's function is for the production of pollen. So here's another diagram of a different flower, but the same structures are seen in all flowers. Okay, so we have this anther that produces pollen, and then we have this filament that actually holds the anther in the correct position. Okay, so the anther produces the pollen while the filament just holds it up. I don't know what I meant for that to be. Ignore that. Okay, pistil and carpel. So the pistil and carpel can be broken down into three parts. Okay, we have the stigma, we have the style, and then we have the ovary. So the carpel's function, we already know, is the female part of the plant. It produces eggs. Eggs are also known as ova. So again, here's a flower. We have the stigma that collects pollen. We have the style that connects the stigma and the ovary. And then down here we have the ovary. It contains the ovule and it becomes a fruit. So one thing to note about this is always remember in order. That's the best way for me. I always remember the female part of the plant is the stigma, the style, and the ovary. I never say in any other type of way. I always say stigma, style, ovary. That's the only way that it sticks in my brain is if I always say it the same way. Okay, and if you look at it, it's pretty obvious at what its job is. Okay, obviously the part at the top is going to be the part that collects pollen because it's going to be the part that's actually up and sticking out of the flower that's able to collect pollen. Right, that makes sense. Okay, we know that the style is this long, skinny part. I mean, obviously its job is to connect the two pieces, the stigma and the ovary. Okay, and then the ovary has the same function as it does in humans and other animals. The ovary contains the ovule, which is like a developing egg. Okay, and one thing you maybe didn't know is that the ovary, as it matures, it becomes the fruit. Okay, and let's make a connection. So if the ovary becomes the fruit and the ovary contains the eggs, then that makes sense because pollen's going to come in, fertilize that egg becomes develops into a fruit, right? And that didn't make any sense. I'm going to definitely delete that out. Stages of sexual reproduction. So we have the pollination. So we can see this bee is taking this pollen. It's going to go to another flower. It's going to drop that pollen on top of the stigma. It's going to travel down the style and into the ovary. That's fertilization. Then everything develops into a fruit, and then seeds are dispersed. Those seeds then plant and grow into an actual plant. Okay, pollination is when pollen is transferred from the anther to the stigma, style, and ovary. Now, there's such thing as self-pollination. So a flower can actually mate with itself in that pollen from its anther can get onto its stigma and then fertilize itself. That is possible. Or there can be things that are called cross-pollination, in which pollen is transferred from one flower to the other flower. Okay, so there's both. There's self-fertilization and there's cross-fertilization. Here's just another graphic of what that looks like. This is called cross-pollination because it's going from one flower to the next. Okay, germination is the next step in plant reproduction. It's when the seed actually starts to grow. So seed gets dispersed and planted, then the seed actually begins to germinate, so it begins to grow roots and then leaves and everything else that it needs. Seed dispersal. Once a plant matures, it grows, there's more seeds that go out and get planted again. Okay, so this is a constant cycle of events that are happening over and over and over again. Okay, there's multiple ways that seeds get planted by nature. So seeds can drop out of the flower, seeds can be blown by wind, seeds can get into water and then get carried away, or animals and insects can actually carry seeds away. So there's many ways in which seeds can get planted by nature. Humans, we buy seeds from the store and we plant them, right? So there's just different ways that seeds can get planted. Okay, so let's just recap. I think I might have went through that a little bit quickly, so let's just recap. So pollination is when pollen is produced by the male part, the anther. Then pollen is transferred from the male part to the female part, the stigma. Then the fertilized ovum becomes a seed embryo. The seed germinates into a plant. Then the plant matures and that cycle repeats. Okay. This is what that looks like. So we have a flower. We have its stamen. Okay. The stamen is made up of the anther and the filament. This is where pollen is produced. Okay. As you can see, the pollen is produced in the anther. Then pollen is moved to another flower. Pollen goes down, passes the stigma, passes the style, and gets into the ovary where it reaches that ovule. The ovule is also known as the egg. Then at that point, it becomes a fertilized egg. And that fertilized egg becomes the embryo of a seed. Then the seed is going to germinate to produce a plant. Mature plant produces flowers, and the cycle repeats itself over and over and over again. Okay? So that is how fertilization occurs. So some questions. So in a flower's stamen, the filament is topped by the what? So what is on top of the filament? It's going to be anther. So if you did not know that, it's in my Quizlet. So make sure you're using the Quizlet. Okay. You also know anther and filament make up the stamen, and I also kept it in blue so you kind of can remember in your mind. These are the male parts of the flower. Then you have what's called an asexual reproduction, where the plant makes an exact copy of itself. Some plants do this, some plants don't. So there are things that are called runners. So if you've ever seen people who cut up onions and they put them into a flower pot and then the onions begin to grow, that's a runner. Okay, that's what I was just talking about. Or if you've ever seen a potato that starts to grow little pieces off of it, budding, right? There are all these little things that are asexual reproduction. Let's recap some important information about plant reproduction. So the flower structure. So the petals, what is their job? What about the stamen? What is their job? The carpel and pistil. Right, so the carpel and pistil is going to be the female part. It's going to produce eggs. The male part is the stamen. It produces pollen. The petals is the pretty part that attracts animals, and it attracts animals for seed dispersal. Let's do a practice question. So what is the structure that is labeled D in the image? So there's a hint. Labeled D is that. What is this called? Stigma, right? So you have the stigma, the style, and the ovary. Remember, in order. Stigma at the top, style, ovary. Remember it like that always. Stigma, style, ovary. Anther and filament. Okay? Female parts of the plants, their job is to produce the eggs. This part of the plant, the male part of the plant, its job is to produce sperm, aka pollen. Okay, please make sure that you're using your resources. So we talked at the beginning, I showed you some of the data that I got. So in this document right here, I'll be updating and adding all of those things you guys asked for. Again, I have all of my YouTube videos linked, so you can always rewatch them without all the embedded questions. Edpuzzle, and I also have the vocabulary cards, the Quizlet cards. And look how simple and easy they are to read, like very simple, and I think you should definitely use them, okay? So last but not least, I'm gonna end with a life pro tip. So make sure that you communicate. So if there's something going on, you have to open your mouth and tell people. No one can read your mind. And I feel like that's the hardest thing in life, is that you expect everyone else to know, oh, I'm sad, oh, I'm struggling, and just think people just know and they're ignoring you. No, everyone has their own things going on in their minds. So you have to open your mouth and actually tell people and actually communicate with them about what's going on. As a teacher, my favorite students are always those who like come and talk to me, who come and email me, who are letting me know what's going on. Because then, let's say you're sitting at a 78 and you want an 80. If you're someone who's been communicating, I know you've been trying, you've been asking me questions, you've been trying your best, then I'm more likely to bump you up. If you're someone who just sits back and just struggles, then and I never get to know you, then how am I supposed to help you? How am I supposed to know what you're struggling with? Okay, so this goes for school, this goes for your job, this goes for your family, relationships, whatever. Like, always communicate. No one can read your mind, and you have to talk to people. Okay, unfortunately, something you gotta do in life, okay? So that's just a life pro tip that I wanted to end my lesson with, okay? So go ahead and get started on your virtual notebook.